Today, I want to talk about the sort of balance between urgency and patience. Seems like we're kind of lacking both of them in society right now. We're getting very complacent, but then we're also not very patient. And maybe those two things are kind of bouncing off each other. That's sort of creating this thing. So let me jump into it. I want to start with talking about urgency and why I think it's so important. So at least for me personally, I always feel like I do better when there's a sense of urgency. Like, for example, when I'm doing a design project, a lot of times I'll have a really hard time getting myself to start the project up until like the very last minute to where I can complete it on time. And then I tend to do my best work under that pressure. And so I think trying to train myself to be able to have that urgency when it's more like self-imposed. I don't know if that's the right term, but like with a design job, if you're putting it off to the last minute, obviously there's a deadline and you have to meet it by that time. So that urgency is sort of built in. So what I'm trying to get better at is having this sense of urgency for pretty much everything in my life. And I'll get a little further into it here later, but I'm seeing a lot of complacency in society and a lot of just, I don't know, it seems like shit's just getting too easy for us or something like that. There's no urgency to achieve this greater version of yourself. And I think a lot of it has to do with distraction. A lot of it has to do with things are easy. You can just push a button and you can get a meal. There's a lot of things playing against us that seem like they're things that are happening for us. Like information is so easy to get. I think all that's leading to a sense of complacency, and it's sort of taking away this urgency. Like I said, when you have that urgency, you have like an increased motivation to get whatever thing done that you're trying to do. You have a higher focus. Your productivity is much higher when you have that sense of urgency. And then on the flip side, you also have to balance it out with patience because, in Stoic philosophy, they talk about the dichotomy of control. So there's a lot of things that are outside of your control. In fact, there's more things outside of your control than are within your control. So even if you have this sense of urgency, there's only a certain amount of things you can control. You can work really hard to push towards whatever it is that you're pushing towards, but a lot of times it's going to take a long time to get those results. So it becomes pretty hard to maintain that urgency. And this is something that I think is kind of a problem for me, which is balancing that patience and urgency. So as something is taking a long time, the urgency starts to fade off because I start to lose patience. And so the dichotomy of control is something that's really helpful because if you keep that top of mind, then you understand that no matter what you do, there's a lot of things that are outside of your control. So like, let's say something like marketing, for example, like you could put all this work in towards marketing, but you don't have any control on how that marketing content is going to land on people. So even if you put in a ton of work, you may not get the return on your investment that you were hoping to get. Same thing with like physical fitness. Like if you're starting out 100 pounds heavier than you would like to be, you could have a sense of urgency to get all that done, but that's going to take a really long time. So there's a huge amount of balance of keep maintaining that urgency, but then also understanding that it's going to take a long time. And even in something like that you think with weight loss, of course that's within my control. If I eat less and move more, I'm going to lose weight, which is true, but there are things that are outside of your control. You don't know if you're going to get an injury. You don't know if you're going to get sick. You don't know if certain things are going to derail all your plans. There's a lot of things that are outside of your control that may set you back. And then that's where your patience is really going to have to come in, and you're really going to have to maintain that balance of urgency and patience. So along those lines of balancing the urgency and patience that's something that I'm dealing with right now because I'm trying to be urgent with all of the goals that I have, but then I'm also wrestling with this idea that I'm getting older. It's like I'm about to hit 50 in September, and while I know that comparing myself to other people's progress is not healthy, in the way that I'm doing it. I think comparison is good if you're looking for inspiration and all that kind of stuff. But what I tend to go towards is like, there are people in positions that I want to be that are younger than me, and it fucks with me. And, you know, it's like, I have a hard time being patient. You know, I'm thinking like, when they're talking about, yeah, you know, certain things are going to take like 10 years. I'm like, fuck, that means I'm going to be 60 by the time that happens. So, you know, it's hard to be patient when you're, sort of thinking on that level. So I find myself struggling with that patience part quite a bit. You know, and I also find that I'm wasting time. You know, that's another thing where, and I don't know if it has to do with me getting impatient, but I do find myself wasting time. And I was just telling Jesse right now, I was like, I waste too much time. And I want to put a thing on my phone lock screen that's just huge letters that says you're wasting time. Like, so every time I look at that fucking phone, it's just going to say that to me, you're wasting time, to try to make sure that I keep that urgency. You know, it's hard. It's hard to do, especially like when things take a long time, and like fucking business is like, I don't know. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday on text, and I was like, I don't know if this is off topic, but I'm going to tell the story anyway. But I sent him this message, and I was like, man, he's also a business owner. He's further along than me. He's got a lot of shit going on. So I really value his opinion. And so I sent him this message, and I was like, man, do you feel like impending doom, like all the fucking time? Like if sales dip for like a couple days, do you feel like you just are going to lose everything? Like, that's where my mind goes. You know, it's crazy. And he said, yeah, all the time. Like, I have a feeling that any business owner listening probably relates to that, because how can I tie it back? I don't know. I kind of got derailed, but how can I tie it back to what we're talking about? I mean, I think it's stuff like that too, actually totally relates if you think about it. If you have that impending doom all the time, like, that could really easily derail your patience and your sense of urgency, because it just puts you in kind of a dark place. So one of the main reasons, and I touched on this before, is that I wanted to talk about this. I thought it went really well with the last episode, talking about, you know, embracing the moment and making sure that you're getting the most out of the last time. If you didn't listen to that, you know, it's not super important, but the idea, of course, was everything you do could possibly be the last time you do it. So if I'm hanging out with my dog and I'm petting her, I try to make sure I'm present, because you never know when the last time that's going to happen. I know it's sad, but I find it a helpful thing. If that sounds of all interest to you and you did not listen to the last episode, go ahead and check that out. You know, maybe there's some shit in there you might like. But why I wanted to talk about this, in addition to it being a pretty decent subject that relates to that, was, like I had said before, that I'm seeing so much complacency in society. And I'm seeing complacency in myself too. I mean, I'm a pretty driven guy, and I work really hard, and I find it hard to stop working a lot of times. But at the same time, if I really audited my whole day, I think there's a lot of time that I wasn't using to the best of my ability. And I think it's the lack of urgency at times that I allow myself to sort of sink into consuming content and shit like that. And it was just happening to me yesterday, where I finished all my work and I had a good productive day. And I found myself just like scrolling through shit and just looking at shit on Instagram or something like that. And I wasn't getting anything out of it. And I caught myself, and I was like, I'm getting zero value out of anything that I'm looking at right now. And so I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to do this anyway, I might as well just look at some information that maybe might help. You know, I don't think it was the right answer. I think putting the phone down and doing something productive probably would have been better, but I started 75 Hard again yesterday, and I have done it a few times, and I talk about it all the time, but I feel differently about this one. And the last one that I did, I failed twice. And then on the second time I failed, I didn't start over again, because I really felt like my mind was not in the right place, and it's totally an excuse. I just didn't do it again, and that's why I didn't do it, because I just didn't feel like my head was there. Like I hated doing it the whole time, and I allowed those sort of intrusive thoughts to come in and tell me that I hated it. You know, instead of trying to turn it around and think like, you know, I'm excited about what's going to happen for this. You know, I think I'm getting way off track. Let me see if I can dial it back in. Actually, I'll get back in here. Really? Okay. So I think I'm all over the place. I'm trying to get my head back in the game here. This ties directly into, because what I was talking about and why I got so far off track, I was talking about complacency in society and things that I'm seeing. And then I was thinking about it putting it back on me. Where am I being complacent? So, doing 75 hard this time, I wrote down how I was going to do it. I wrote down my schedule. I wrote down several different things, and I had it in my mind that this time is going to be the best time that I've ever done it. And this time I'm going to achieve the best results that I've ever achieved, because the program is a life-changing program. And I feel like a lot of times that I've done it, I sort of coasted through, and I could have done it a lot better. If you're going to do it anyway, you're going to do 75 days of this shit, you might as well go all out and finish that at the end a whole different person. And that's my goal for this. And one of the main motivations for doing this is so that I can be a better example to people in society, primarily people in my company. So I was talking to one of my people there, and I said, you know, we're going to push this thing to a whole nother level. And it's kind of cliche to say, but it's like, it's going to require a new version of me in order to get the company to a new version of itself. That's just what it's going to require. And I felt like if I go into 75 hard and have this urgency to pretty much go all out as much as I can, I'm not going to go all out because I'll probably fucking hurt myself, but I'll push myself a lot harder than I did before. And I really intend to have a whole different outcome than I ever have doing that. So I can get into a little bit of other things about complacency in society. There's all kinds of things like fear of failure, lack of motivation, social pressure, shit like that. But I'm seeing all this kind of stuff where, you know, there's like videos of people that are pretty much promoting complacency and promoting unhealthy behavior and shit like that. I don't know. It concerns me because a lot of these people have big followings, and they're saying like, you know, it's okay to, you know, eat like shit, and it's okay to do this and that. And I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do, but it's not healthy to do that stuff. And it's promoting sort of complacency that I think is not the direction that we need to go. I think we need more people that are out there really pushing themselves and have this sense of urgency to be the best version of themselves possible, because we're really influential. Like I've said it a bunch of times on this show, it doesn't matter if you're like a 12-year-old kid, you might think nobody's looking at me. Nobody's trying to model my behavior. I'm just a kid. But that's not true. You might have a little brother, you know, you might have somebody in school that it doesn't matter who you are. There's probably somebody that's looking at you trying to see what their next move should be. That's how all of this shit works. And that's why I think it's so dangerous to have this kind of content out there where people are like being like, yeah, fuck it, you know, just do whatever. It's like, it's just not a good mindset. I don't believe it's a good mindset to be promoting, and I don't think it's what we need. I believe it's more about having a growth mindset, like believing that you can change things, rather than thinking, oh, I have all this stuff against me and I can't make any progress because of this and that, because of my genetics, because of like my upbringing or all this kind of stuff. That's what they refer to as a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset will tell you when you hear somebody, let's just say, talk about it in graph terms. You know, some people may say, oh, I don't have the skills to be able to do characters. And that keeps them from doing characters. I'm one of those people. I don't do characters because of all the shit that I just said. Fear of failure, lack of motivation, societal pressures, because I'm concerned, like if I do a character and it looks like shit, I fall into that category also. I try to keep myself from thinking on those levels, but that's it. I don't feel like I have what it takes to do that stuff. When I look at like, you might not know all of the examples that I looked at when I was young, because maybe you guys are looking at different people, but I was looking at like Cokes from AWR and Tyke from AWR, Skill, UTI, Hex, TGO. Like those guys all were super good at characters. And so my fixed mindset has always kept me away from doing it. I think that's the only reason why I don't do that shit. That's the only reason that I don't do a lot of shit, really. And it's so stupid because I always tell myself that I don't care what other people think. But then when I'm talking about this right now, I actually do. And so maybe I should do characters. I don't know how I got to that point, but that's a fixed mindset. That's me having a fixed mindset. I know I can do them deep down because I have done some shit in the past that I feel like was on the way, and I would have to put in the time. So anyway, I'm gonna move on from this character thing. I think you get the idea. But fixed mindset versus growth mindset. The fixed mindset of me saying I don't really have the skills or the talent to do characters, so I'm just going to stick to what I know. That's a fixed mindset. Growth mindset would say, maybe I won't be the best character guy in the whole fucking planet, but if I put in work, I will get better at it. And maybe I will actually get great at it if I put in the time. That's more of a growth mindset. So if somebody says, I can't do this because I have fucking ADD or any of whatever number, whatever acronym, I can't do this because of this. That's a fixed mindset. And just, it's possible that it's going to be harder for you to do certain things. And it might just be you saying that you can't do it because it's an easy thing to say. You hear a lot of people saying, I can't do this because of this. And that's a fixed mindset. I'm thinking your fixed mindset is keeping you from your true potential. So I found that reading about personal development and focusing on getting myself better is getting me closer and closer to my true potential. But what's interesting about it is you will never, ever achieve your true potential, which is not meant to be discouraging. It just means that if you're really, really trying to level up all the time, then that means you're always leveling up. So your true potential is always going to be ahead of you. The good thing about that is that you're always going to have something to strive for. If you think about it, if you don't push yourself forward all the time, you can look back on several versions of yourself that you would have never hit. That there's a version of you that a previous version would have said, I'll never get there. And you could be way past it. Hopefully that makes sense. So along those lines, there's this idea of taking massive action. And this was the first book that I read when I started doing this personal development shit in I think the first personal development book I ever read was in 2019. And it was Grant Cardone's 10X rule. And one of the biggest things that, I don't know if it's the biggest thing he talks about in there, but my biggest takeaway was setting really high goals and taking massive action towards those goals. I've tried to keep that in mind, and that's where I find that I struggle with this balance, because when things aren't happening as fast as I want it to be, I start to lose patience, and that causes me to lose that urgency. So this idea of massive action was really what has gotten me. I've done a lot of growth between 2020 and 2023, and my business growth has reflected that as well. My physical body, my mindset, a lot of things have gotten better since then. And and that was like the springboard, this idea of taking massive action. So imagine wherever it is that you are in your life, you could be way further along than me, or you could be somewhere else. If you're not already taking massive action and have this sense of urgency, imagine what that can do in a short period of time. So if you spent, 75 Hard is a good example. If you spent 75 days taking massive action, you could come out of that 75 days being a dramatically improved version of yourself. And again, that's what I feel like society needs right now. It needs more people doing that. Every one of us taking massive action towards being the best version of ourselves can actually contribute to a better society. It could contribute to a better graph culture. It can be better, contribute to be having a better, even your neighborhood or your family. Because like I said earlier, everybody has influence over other people by being the example of something that they don't think that they can achieve. Imagine if you're broke and you have no ambition and all this kind of stuff, like a lot of us have been in our lives. And then all of a sudden you're like, you know what? Fuck this, man. I'm going to change my whole shit up. I'm going to take massive action towards this goal. I've had this business idea for years and I never wanted to start it. Imagine if you took massive action on that and just were relentless about it. Obviously you got to learn a lot of things. I mean, I'm not saying everything's going to work out and it's going to be all fucking great, because business is fucking hard. But at the same time, if you take massive action and you maintain that sense of urgency, and you are also patient because you don't know how fast it's going to come along. Maybe it's going to take a long time. Maybe it's going to happen fast for you. There's a lot of things that are outside of your control. But imagine if you were able to make huge strides forward. Everybody in your circle sees you doing that. You're going to influence at least a couple of them. Like imagine if you're, and you see this in like addiction and stuff. A lot of people talk about this. If you have a circle of people that your drinking buddies or your people that you party with, you start getting your shit together. There's a lot of tension in there, but I would imagine that if you start getting your shit together and you start making huge improvements in your life, and those people that you used to party with really see how much benefit you're getting from being that way, you're probably going to take some people along with you. And then with this whole social media thing, like it doesn't mean you got to put your business out there, but it's an opportunity for people to see that you're leveling up and that you're becoming a much better version of yourself. And so with the amount of reach that we have, as far as we know, I mean, obviously there could be some shit in ancient history that we don't know about, but as far as we know in our fucking historical records right now, we have the most reach that's ever been possible. So you can reach all these people. So imagine, I'm just talking about people right in your circle. Imagine with shit like social media and all this kind of stuff, or if you have a blog that you write on or whatever, any of that stuff, any of these tools that are readily available and easy to access, you could be reaching people all over the world that you don't even know that you're reaching them. I mean, I get messages from people that I've never spoke to in my life, and they talk about something that they heard on the podcast that's actually affecting them and changing their life for the better. You could be way more influential than you think. There's people out there that you could be affecting simply by becoming a better version of yourself, and other people will see it and they become a better version of themselves. And that's exponential, because then they're going to influence people and those people are going to influence people. I mean, the way I see it is like everybody has so much power to be able to affect positive change just by simply getting better because of that. Because imagine it's not something, they talk about it in business, like word of mouth marketing, how it's the most powerful form of marketing. And if you do a really good job for a customer and they're going to be so happy with the service or the food or whatever it is that you're providing for them, at some point they're going to tell somebody else about it. And then that's going to bring in another person. They may tell 2 or 3 people. Those people come in, they have the same experience. They go out and tell other people. Imagine the exponential growth that can happen from that. And the same shit can happen here simply by you choosing to be a better version of yourself. All right, good.
Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And yeah, stay up.